Hey, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name's Olivia, and I am a gender affirming voice teacher. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about the concept of finding your own voice and what that means. I feel like I toss that phrase around a lot, like, well, you're finding your own voice, your authentic voice, your true voice, all these things. But I think that, especially if you're just getting started with voice training, it can kind of be like this nebulous thing. Like, what does that even mean to find my own voice? What are the actionable steps that I can take to get to my voice? So we're going to talk about what that entails, kind of what the process looks like, from going through the basics to finding and uncovering this authentic voice that's truly your own. We're also going to talk about how long that might take and how exploration can really be the key to this whole process. So let's get started. So the voice is a unique expression of yourself, right? When you meet somebody new, you are presenting your voice to them. It's a part of how somebody might perceive you. It's a part of how you're presenting yourself to the world. So it's important that that expression feels like you. It feels like you are representing yourself in a way that really feels good and empowering and authentic. It can really be an expression of your identity, of your emotions, of your personality, of how you're feeling that day. It can be a lot of different things represented in your voice. So when we talk about finding your voice, we're talking about this process of self-discovery through voice work. So it's not just about the techniques involved in voice training, but really this discovery of how you really want to express yourself in the world. That might be embracing parts of your voice that are distinct to you. That might be your voice shifting, whether you're feeling one way or another at different days of the week. It can mean a lot of different things for different people. But before you get into that, it really is important to learn the basics, the fundamentals of voice training. So if we're thinking about vocal feminization, the first most important technique to work on is resonance. So resonance is a technique that you will experience in your body, and also something that will change the tone quality of your voice. So we're basically focused on bringing sounds more forward in your face. So feeling buzzy qualities up in the lips, and also changing the size and shape of the vocal tract. So it could be the difference between sounding something like, hey, how are you? What's going on? Versus, hey, how are you? What's going on? So even without changing my pitch, I'm changing that sound quality. Hey, how are you? What's going on? Hey, how are you? What's going on? So that shift in resonance can be not only something that feels really different and feels really good in the body, but also a really big change in the way your sound is presented. Another one of the fundamental techniques is pitch. So pitch is, might be the first thing that you maybe think of as a feminine, more feminine perceived voice might have a higher pitch. But when we combine that with resonance, that's when the sounds really start to be perceived as more feminine. So when we just move the pitch up, it might not sound as natural as when we combine that resonance, that forward feeling, that smaller vocal tract with a higher pitch. Intonation is another one of the foundational aspects. So this is basically the movement of the pitch as you're speaking. So when you're moving up and down, hi, how are you? Would be more movement versus more flat. Hi, how are you? Not much movement in the pitch there. So feminine perceived voices oftentimes have more movement in the pitch versus more masculine perceived voices oftentimes are a little bit flatter or a little bit more monotone. And vocal weight is another key component of vocal feminization. So vocal weight is basically the heavy quality or a thin or light quality that we have in the voice. So an example might be, hey, how are you? Ha, 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 ha. Hey, 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 how are you? Versus, hey, how are you? This is a little bit lighter and thinner. Hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? This is a little thicker. So kind of has a relationship to volume. It can also have a relationship to pitch. But these are some of the foundational aspects of voice training that are important to get a good handle on before you start to work on this idea of finding your voice. So this process of really finding a voice that feels authentic, it could take weeks, months, years to really find the voice that feels 100% congruent with yourself. Now, does that mean that you along the way won't have a feminine perceived voice? No, that doesn't mean that, because all along the way, as you make gradual shifts, as you get more comfortable with each of these elements, you're going to, change the way your voice is perceived, and you're going to have different levels of, comfort and ability to maintain these new techniques as you work on practice sentences and passages, and then working on conversation. So I think that once you get to this conversation stage, when you're really working on putting these elements together in conversation, that's when you can start to really develop this idea of your authentic voice. I think it can be challenging when you're just reading sentences. Unless you're like a newscaster, maybe you're like a newscaster for your job or something, where you're reading stuff. But yeah, I think that, in conversation is where you're going to be yourself. So once you start using these techniques in your conversations with your friends, where you're totally relaxed and having fun, or with family, or if you have coworkers you like to work with, when you start to use it in that way, you will start to uncover things that come naturally to you, things that feel good to you, that might be more challenging to practice in the context of sentences. So some ways to think about practicing that might lead to this kind of self-discovery. Things like playing games is really great, because you're having fun and in the moment, or maybe you have to think quickly. Going to like a trivia night, or playing a board game with your friends, going on practice outings. So maybe you do something different every week where you have to interact in different kinds of spaces. Of course, this has to be, based on your level of comfort, but maybe going to a coffee shop type of vibe, maybe going to a concert, maybe like different places where you might talk to different people. Maybe a run club if you like to go exercise, or a different exercise class or something like that. So different spaces where you're putting yourself in different situations, and different vibes are gonna maybe influence the way you're using your voice too. Like the way you use your voice in the library is probably not going to be the same as you use your voice in your run club when you're running along trying to talk to somebody as you're running, or something like that. So putting yourself in those types of new situations with different types of people in different places can help you work on that self-discovery. You can also play around with character voices, doing mimicry of other people's voices. So once you get a good handle on the foundational elements, you can mimic and do mimicry, of course, of voices before you really have a handle on what you're doing to get there, and that's totally great. But then once you do have more of a handle on it, like, okay, I can recognize that when I do this husky voice, you can start to notice, like, what does that feel like? Oh, that feels like when my breath, it's kind of a lighter breath flow. That's what I'm experiencing in this huskier voice or something. So having more of an understanding, a connection mentally with what's going on in your voice, I think that can help to inform as well. Like, oh, I was just playing around trying to do this voice, and I actually really like the way that sounds. I like what that feels like in my body, that feels good to me. So character voices, imitating people, that's a really great way to discover your authentic voice too. Even though you're not being yourself, you're mimicking, but you can kind of pick and choose the things that you really like and the things that you identify with. So in terms of a time frame of how long it would take or it should take to find your unique voice, there is no time frame. Everybody's journey, everybody's path is going to look different. So if you look at Reddit or online or whatever, see a video of somebody like, oh, I changed my voice and it's perfect and I love it after 1 week of training, like, that's probably not realistic. I would venture to guess that person wasn't being honest. So, it takes time. It takes practice to get to a point where you really feel like you're mastering the fundamentals, and then that you're settled in enough to it and aware enough to make those choices and those discoveries about what feels good for you. Try not to compare yourself to other people's journey. Everybody is going to have a different experience. So it's also important to stay open to this idea of experimentation. So if you're so focused on like, why am I not exactly where I want to be with my voice? Like, this is so frustrating. What's wrong with me? If you get stuck in that kind of cycle, try to think a little bit more playful with it. Maybe that's a time where you could be like, I'm just going to put on Looney Tunes and I'm going to, do an impression of Bugs Bunny and see what that feels like. Rather than, taking yourself so seriously in this process, allow it to be a little bit more fun and exploratory. It is natural to feel frustrated. It is natural to feel like you're plateauing. It is natural to feel like, your patience is running thin, all of those things, or to question whether you're doing things right. And there's no right way to do things. I think ultimately, if you are not experiencing pain or overwhelming, vocal fatigue, you're not doing anything wrong. You're exploring your voice and trying new things. So try to get out of your own head as much as you can, and acknowledge your feelings when it comes up. If you're frustrated, you're frustrated. Don't then get mad at yourself because you're feeling frustrated, and then that's not moving you forward. All those things. Take it as it comes. If you're feeling frustrated, that's normal and that's okay. But if you're able to try to pull back and see the big picture of, what, I'm just gonna play around with this. Like I said, put on some Looney Tunes. Is it just me? Am I wanting to watch Looney Tunes quite a bit? Really, I want to watch Ren and Stimpy. That's my favorite. But I would like to watch some cartoons. But that's not really related to what we're talking about. But remember to celebrate these small victories that come up. If you go into a situation, a new situation, and you feel like, what, that actually really felt like me when I went and ordered that coffee from the barista, or that coffee date I had with a friend or whatever. The way I said this word actually felt really good. Or, it can be a single word or a phrase that you're excited about. So make sure to celebrate those small wins. So this process of finding your own feminine voice is not something that happens overnight. Remember that there's this flow to things, that you learn these techniques, you sort of master those techniques, you work on sentences, and then you move on to more of that nitty-gritty work of what really, really feels right to me. If you're interested in taking a private lesson or checking out group classes, you can click the link down in the description. And I also have an e-course, a vocal feminization e-course called True Voice, if you can believe, okay, finding your authentic voice. It's called True Voice Vocal Feminization e-course, and it is going to be out tomorrow. So this is a self-study e-course that's completely, yours forever. So you can always come back to the same material. So I'm really excited to be releasing that October 1st. So you can take a look down in the description to learn more about that course as well. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this was helpful, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next video.